Welcome back. Let's return back to those demonstrations in Iran. And as dramatic as they are, though, they are not unprecedented. Over the past 3 decades, there have been similar mass demonstrations, usually intended to spur reforms or as protests against oppressive measures by the regime, a regime that in the end has been successful in repressing them. But how might what we see now, those tens of thousands of people in the streets, be different? And will they eventually peter out or be quashed like those before? Our senior international affairs correspondent, Owen Alterman, reports with some answers.
1999, 2003, 2009, 2011, and now this. Iranians again taking to the streets to protest their government. Videos capturing these protesters in Tehran on Saturday, with reports of security forces cracking down, but Iran's president voicing a softer line.
So
the people have a right to criticize all over the country. But criticism is entirely different from violence and damaging public properties.
But where will these demonstrations lead? Past protests in Iran ended in failure, or at least a failure to bring about deep change. 1999, thousands of students at Tehran University protesting the regime after it shut down a reformist newspaper. 2003, another set of student protests rocked Tehran, starting as anger about university privatization, then turning into something wider. 2009, a much bigger event. Possibly millions taken to the streets after a presidential vote they said had been rigged. Their green movement capturing the world's attention, and then brutally suppressed by the regime. So too were protests in 2011. The protests this time are not nearly as big as in 2009, but they might be more widespread. And they're taking on the country's supreme leader head-on, which the 2009 protesters did not do that bluntly. On the other hand, some say these protests have a different driving force: economics, not politics. The people in the streets this time are a diverse group. Some may want economic change that the regime could try to deliver, not necessarily political change that would threaten it. But if so, will the regime try to meet the demands? Or will it do what it's done in the past? Crush. Owen Alterman, i24 News.
Well, in the studio with us is Ilham Gindin, an Iran expert, a member of a core faculty member at the Shalem College of Liberal Arts in Jerusalem. But, of course, protests against the Iranian regime have also broken out in France and Germany. Let's go to our correspondent, Paulina Garayev in Berlin. And, Paulina, what have we seen there in Berlin in terms of protests against Iran?
Or I'm standing right now in front of the Iranian embassy here in Berlin, where just shortly ago, a demonstration ended, attended by, of course, Iranian expats, but also German left-wing activists that have been demonstrating here also in Berlin, but also in other German cities today, tomorrow, and actually since Friday. They are protesting, of course, the harsh reaction of the Iranian regime to these demonstrations. They are calling the Iranian government to release protesters that were arrested during the unrest, but also they're criticizing the attitudes of the German government that is seen as a close friend of the Iranian regime, and it's putting its economical interest above moral concerns, and they expect it to show perhaps more solidarity with the demonstrators in the streets of Iran, which they say, the demonstrators with whom I talked today, they feel part of this possibly developing protest.
Okay, Paulina Garayev in Berlin, thank you for that.
Tamar, let's talk about the protesters inside Iran. It's always very important to look at who those people are, where the protests are happening, what is driving them. What stands out to you this time versus 2009, the so-called Green Revolution?
Okay, first of all, this time it's all over. The hashtag in Twitter is Tazahurat Sarasari. Protests all over the country. I saw the calls for protests in Telegram and in sheets that are spreading through the internet. It's literally everywhere. It's in hundreds of places.
Well, that's actually very interesting. I want to pause on that for a moment because we know the Iranian regime has paused access to Telegram several times throughout the past 5 days. What kind of calls are there in Telegram? What are they saying? What are they telling their fellow Iranians to do?
They're saying, for example, in Mashhad, in this square, at this hour, and if the security forces beat you, beat them back.
Tamar, the fact that this protest has no recognizable leaders, as for example, back in the 2009 election protests, is that an advantage or a disadvantage in at least maintaining the momentum?
I don't know if it's an advantage or a disadvantage, but the difference is that the leaders in the 2009 protests said, we elected one president for the Islamic Republic and we got another president. This time they say, hardliners, moderates, you're the same. We don't want an Islamic Republic. This time it's against the Islamic Republic. It's not against this or that president.
Do you think that they see the government, the president, Rouhani, on the same level as the supreme leader? Do they have as much anger towards both?
No, but the first protest said both Margbar Rouhani and Margbar Dictator, both death to Rouhani and death to the dictator. And this is why the word in the street says that it was the regime itself that organized it. The hardliners organized it in order to overthrow Rouhani, whom they don't like because he's too moderate, he's too open to the West, in their eyes. So, and most people don't hate Rouhani as much as the leader because they know that Rouhani is the executive. He's the leader of the executive part, and the leader is the one, Khamenei is the one who decides.
Is this purely economic? I mean, we've seen some of those numbers, 12.9% unemployment, almost 30% youth unemployment, or is this about more than just those numbers?
It's much more than that. The first demonstrations were about the economy, about the people's disappointment that the nuclear agreements are not apparent in their own pockets. They don't feel it in their own pockets yet. The economy is improving, but they don't feel it yet. And this is why the hardliners thought that they would be against Rouhani. But it's very fast. It became, Ey Shah Iran bargard be Iran. They said, King of Iran, come back. The Shah of Iran, come back. They said, we made a revolution. What a mistake we made. They said they made Islam, they took Islam as a ladder to climb, and they stepped on us. Now it's totally against the regime. It's against Khamenei. They say Khamenei, leave us alone.
All right, well, stay with us tomorrow. I want to go a little bit more in depth on this, on what we're seeing in Iran, how it's different than the past. We're going to go out for a quick break, but this conversation continues when we're back. Plus, later, a 2,700-year-old discovery in Jerusalem. Why are archaeologists